Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Have You Heard? Today, in honor of the 4th of July this weekend, we're going to start with some trivia. So use the comments section to take your best guess at our trivia questions. So the first question is, what was the first state to recognize the 4th of July as a holiday? Again, the question is, what was the first state to recognize the 4th of July as a holiday? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't Wisconsin, and a couple options for you to choose from. Do you think it was New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, or Delaware? Again, if you're just tuning in today, we're starting with some trivia in honor of the 4th of July. And the first trivia question is, what was the first state to recognize the 4th of July as a holiday? Your options are New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, or Delaware. Looks like we have some guesses coming in. So for those of you that said Massachusetts, you were correct. Massachusetts began recognizing the 4th of July as an official holiday on July 3rd, 1781. At this point, Congress had not even begun designating federal holidays, which they started doing on June 28, 1870, nearly 90 years later. The first 4 federal holidays were New Year's Day, Independence Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. All right, so the next trivia question we're going to do is around food and the 4th of July. So last year, it was predicted that Americans spend around $6.7 billion, billion with a B, on tasty treats to celebrate the 4th of July. This included food and other cookout expenses, but doesn't even include the booze. What do you think the favorite 4th of July food is? Again, the question is, what do you think the favorite 4th of July food is? There are some options to help you out. Those would be hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken wings, or pizza. Again, thank you for everyone joining us today on Have You Heard? We're starting with some 4th of July trivia today. And the question is, what do you think America's favorite 4th of July food is? There's some options. The options are hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken wings, or pizza. So it does look like we have some more guesses coming in. See a guess for bratwurst, hamburger. The correct answer is hot dogs. So thanks for those of you that guessed that. Americans consume around 150 million hot dogs on 4th of July each year. So that's a lot of hot dogs. Well, you guys are all here to hear about biosecurity today, and we have a couple guests joining us. So we'll get started with the topic. I have Dr. Angie joining us, one of Armor Animal Health's professional services veterinarians. She is along with a dairy producer from southern Wisconsin. So Dr. Angie, why don't you go ahead and get started by introducing yourself and share with us what your favorite 4th of July food is.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So I'm Dr. Angie Garavet. I grew up in Waukesha County. I'm a little bit of a rare oddity in that you don't usually find a food animal vet that I did not grow up on a farm, but was and am still very jealous of those that did, however. So I tried to gain experience through many odd jobs. Went to UW-Madison for undergrad, and then in only about 1 month's time, I took my boards, got married, and graduated vet school. So that was back in 2015. I went to vet school at Ross University, which is actually in the Caribbean on a lovely island named St. Kitts. Now I live in East Troy with my husband Brandon and our 2 kids, Penny and Madeline, 4 and 1 years old, and our 2 black labs, Molly and Pickles. We're also avid Packer and Badger fans, and I've been with Armor Animal Health for about 5 years now, and I cover southern Wisconsin and all of Iowa. And my favorite food for 4th of July would probably be just hamburgers on the grill, I guess. And I like to decorate cakes with like strawberries and blueberries, so it makes out like a flag decoration on there. So.
Awesome. I also love to make a fruit pizza with the 4th of July theme going. So fun stuff. Well, I want to remind our viewers that are joining us live today that if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to throw those in the comments section, and we'll have some time at the end of the presentation where Dr. Angie will be with us along with Stacy from Okuch Dairy to answer any of those questions about biosecurity that you may have. We will be giving away some Armor swag to the best questions, so feel free to throw out any questions that you may have. And if you are watching the recorded version here on Facebook or on our YouTube channel, feel free to ask us a question as well. We'll be sure to respond back to you in the comments section. So to kick it off, Dr. Angie, why don't you begin talking a little bit about what biosecurity means and some things that farms can do to protect their operation?
Sure. So biosecurity is basically just a system of management practices that prevent or greatly reduce the risk of introducing new diseases to a farm and the transmission between animals. So it's really important because it minimizes the introduction of diseases onto farms and limits the spread of disease. It also reduces the risk of disease between being carried between farms. So it controls the transmission of disease-causing agents between animals, from animals to feed, and from animals to equipment that may directly or indirectly contact other animals. So some good prevention tips would be just having a lot of screening or testing from the animals, from the herd that you're getting. So a good herd history, buying from a reliable source, getting up-to-date health records, having your vets inspect the animals prior to purchase, and just limiting your herd's contact with other animals. So even your neighbor's livestock, some wildlife, or roaming cats and dogs.
Now that we have a basic understanding of what biosecurity is, why don't you talk to us a little bit about how it can be transmitted?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways of transmission: aerosol, direct contact, fomites, oral, vector-borne, and zoonotic. So aerosol obviously is just droplets being passed through the air that susceptible animals are inhaling. So that can come from a cough, a sneeze, urine, birthing fluids, or feces. Direct contact, so the disease agent in animals or environment is being transferred to the skin, even mucous membranes or an open wound of a susceptible animal. That's usually rubbing, biting, licking, or contact with blood, urine, milk, saliva, nasal secretions, or any body lesions of the infected animal. Even reproductive transmission, so that's breeding or the dam to the offspring during gestation, birth, or during nursing. The fomites that I talked about, so those are just contaminated inanimate objects. Those are carrying agents to other animals, so that would be like your brushes, needles, shovels, trailers, or humans even. Your oral transmission is just consumption by a susceptible animal by licking or biting an infected animal. So a lot of your bodily secretions can contaminate feed, water, or other objects in the environment, like licking or chewing feed bunks or fencing. And then your vector-borne, so those are your insects. There can be mechanical or biological vectors. Your mechanical, they're just carrying the microorganism. They're not replicating it from host to host. Those are more your flies and your cockroaches. And the biological vectors, those are actually replicating the microorganisms before they're transmitting it. So those are your fleas, your ticks, and your mosquitoes. And then the last one, zoonotic, those are being transmitted between animals and humans. So those would be diseases like brucellosis, tuberculosis, West Nile, and the plague.
So now I want you to kind of talk to us a little bit about the 3 major components of biosecurity, and also share with us an acronym to help remember these components. But before you jump into that, I want to remind our viewers that maybe are just tuning in today that we have Dr. Angie here joining us talking about biosecurity, as well as Stacy from Okuch Dairy, who will be visiting with us a little bit later. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation today about biosecurity, feel free to throw those into the comment section, and we'll have some time at the end to get those answered. Do you want to go ahead and share with us, Dr. Angie, the 3 major components of biosecurity?
Sure. So To remember it easily, just remember IRS. It's hard to forget them when they come to audit you. So IRS for isolation, resistance, and sanitation. So isolation is the most important step in your disease control. You want to isolate your animals once on your property for at least 2 weeks, but ideally we want to do 30 days or a month. They even recommend 60 days for swine. Just keeping things isolated with separate things, separate ventilation from resident animals, even feed and water troughs. The big risk areas are common equipment to feed or haul or scrape manure, your clothing or your boots, wildlife vectors, stock trucks or trailers not being cleaned between herds, and thinking of common fence lines, shows and fairs, and possible contact areas like that. Your R in IRS is resistance, so thinking about nutrition, the environment, drugs, and vaccines can improve your animal's ability to resist this disease. So we really want to focus on nutrition and environment the most. Good nutrition will help animals respond better to antibiotics if needed, and vaccines as well, keeping them healthy and growing. Your environment is, if properly managed, will help to decrease stress and promote resistance to different infectious disease agents. So just keeping things clean, dry, and not overstocked. And then after you think of nutrition and environment, you can throw in the vaccines and at your last resort, antibiotics. And then the S in IRS, sanitation. So just minimizing the spread and limiting the course of infectious disease. So removing carrier or persistently infected animals, disinfecting contaminated equipment or facilities, removing the contaminated material after you remove the animals or you cure them. This removes the source of the infectious agent. So you also want to think about infectious agents leaving your farm. So biosecurity is not just about preventing the spread of disease from coming on your farm, but also leaving and entering the food chain. So looking at different disinfectant charts just to know what the best disinfectant you should use for your situation. And I think Armor actually has a lovely tech bulletin on disinfectants you can kind of look at. But when using disinfectants, you really want to remove all the organic material first, and then it'll help improve the effectiveness of the disinfectant.
Yes, so there is a tech bulletin that was just shown on the screen. So if you are interested in getting that tech bulletin on disinfectants, you can let us know in the comments section or on the survey that will be posted at the end. So if you're just joining us today, we have Dr. Angie joining us talking about biosecurity, and she just went through the 3 main components of biosecurity. You can remember those with an easy acronym, IRS. The I stands for isolation, R stands for resistance, and S stands for sanitation. Next, Dr. Angie is going to be talking a little bit about some of the farm security measures you can take and some steps a farm can take before creating a biosecurity plan.
Yeah, so the security part of farm security, so you want to verify the identity of anyone, contractors or vendors or anyone you see on the farm that you don't recognize. You could do background checks on new employees, restricting the movement of visitors and their vehicles to areas that they can't contaminate livestock. You could also have all visitors wear visitor passes or check in with the front office. I have a couple farms that do that. Securing all your medications and having only certain people administering them or being able to get them. Entry doors should be secure and locked, and having protective equipment available and being able to function with that equipment. And then, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, just looking after farm employee health, you want to provide a clean work environment. So providing soap or hand sanitizer, towels, toilet paper, etc. Making sure your employees feel comfortable to communicate if they're sick or have a fever to stay home, which I know is hard on a farm. Also, if they're in close proximity, less than 6 feet, like when they're milking, you could provide masks or just communicating risk factors to them, like touching your face, covering your coughs and sneezes, etc. And then another good pandemic kind of preventative is just cross-training your employees. So if anyone got sick on your farm, just so that they could take over other jobs from the sick people, communicating the CDC guidelines verbally or putting signs up on your farm, separating or taking out some chairs in your break room so that employees are spreading out when they're on break or eating. And then disinfecting commonly used surfaces just regularly to keep down transmission. So when you're designing a biosecurity plan for your farm, you want some characteristics of the farm and risks associated. You want to look at those. So looking at your farm, is it open or closed? Is your state free from certain diseases? Is there contact possible between production animals of neighboring farms? Is there wildlife contact possible? So rabies or lepto, salmonella. How many people work on the farm, and do they have animals of their own that are livestock? You also want to identify the most important infectious diseases in your region and potentially your farm. So just setting priorities, you know that efforts can be efficient and you can't tackle all the diseases at the same time. And then your third step is just designing the actual biosecurity plan, which can combat that introduction in a most cost-effective way, implementing it, and then evaluating it regularly with all the farm workers and with your vet.
Good, thank you, Dr. Angie. And if you are joining us and maybe don't have a biosecurity plan but are interested in getting one started, you can certainly reach out to us and we would love to help you. I know Dr. Angie's going through a lot of information today and you maybe not be able to jot it all down. So feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to get you the tools you need. Why don't you go ahead and get started talking about how to actually go about making a plan?
Sure. So just making your biosecurity plan for your farm. First, you want to assess the risks on your farm. So prioritizing the disease agents. Those will be based on susceptibility of your animals, the species, their age, even the production stage of the animals. The risk of exposure may depend on your management or your type of housing and your potential contact with wild or feral animals. So just remembering those risk factors can be found in animals, pets, people, rodents, even farm equipment or buildings, tools or manure, water, and feed. So just assessing that, looking at visitors coming on your farm and putting them into 3 categories. So low, moderate, or high. Your low would be visitors from more urban areas who have never had contact with livestock. Your moderate visitors would be visitors that routinely visit farms with little or no contact with animals. So those would be your sales, your mechanics, your delivery people. And then your higher risk visitors would be your veterinarians, livestock haulers, livestock owning neighbors, and anyone with close contact with animals and their bodily discharges. The next step would be to conduct a facility assessment of your farm. So you want to identify how these disease agents can be transferred from one location to another. Oops. And then the next step,
The risk communication, right? Isn't that step number 3?
Yeah, so your third step is communicating your risk. You want to make sure that you're explaining the plan that you came up with to all your farm workers, your suppliers of goods and services, and also to your customers to ensure compliance to the protocols that you set, even with your vet as well. So assess your risk, manage your risk, and then communicate that plan that you've made.
Really good information, Dr. Angie. I now want to turn it over to Stacy, who's joining us today from Oak Hooch Dairy. Stacy, why don't you begin by telling us a bit about your farm, the history, what your role is on the farm, and don't forget to tell us your favorite 4th of July food too.
Sure. Hi, guys. My favorite 4th of July food is probably watermelon. And our farm was started by my dad in the 1970s with about 30 cows. And today we milk around 800, and we're located in Hillsboro, Wisconsin. And my role on the farm has changed in the last couple of years. I was always the chief calf and heifer raiser. And 2 years ago, I took a position at our local elementary school as a special ed teacher. But I'm still pretty involved on the farm. I do a lot with the calves still. Also have been helping out with more of the overall herd management during COVID and our summer break from school. So that's kind of been my role lately. And as far as biosecurity on our farm goes, we are fortunate enough that we have a calf barn, and it is 3 years old, and we really thought about biosecurity when we designed it. So we really control that flow of traffic coming into the barn. So they have to come in, and I don't know how well it'll show, but through a utility room. And so they can't go directly into the barn. All visitors have to enter this way, and there's a sign up on the door. Again, I don't know how well we'll see it there. That kind of reminds visitors that this is a biosecure facility and that we do require sanitization before you're allowed to enter. And we have a hose and we have a boot bath right there, and we have boot baths in all of our feeder rooms as well. So our employees are encouraged to always spray their boots and dip in a boot bath that's made with a mixture of Tetrol and water every time they come in and out of a pen, just so we can cut down on transferring those pathogens from calf to calf. We also try to really talk with our employees about, how important it is to protect themselves, knowing that there's a lot of things that can get a person sick from a calf. Mainly crypto was something that we struggled with more in hutches than we do in the barn, but nobody wants crypto. That would be a bad couple weeks for you. So we talk a lot about the importance of using gloves, and kind of pulled some of our products that we use. So we have the Melkers Helpers gloves, as well as we use chlorine dioxide, and we mix it fresh every morning. And we use that to spray ourselves down, because we're always sporting some sort of UtterTech or other washable bib whenever we're interacting with the calves. Another thing that we do is our pen. So when our calves come into the barn, they eventually will go to a group feeder pen, but they start out in background pens and they're individualized. So during those first couple of weeks, we can minimize that calf to calf contact when their immune system is really just getting going. And then when they go into the feeder pens, they're obviously commingled. So one of our biggest challenges is the calf to calf transfer of things. So some of the things that we do to help with that are every feeder gets its own nipple. So all of our nipples are labeled with a number. And so calves in pen 5 only ever get pen 5 nipples, and we change the nipples 3 times a day. So we cut down on a little bit there. We talk about the importance of working from the youngest calves to the oldest calves. And if you have to kind of bridge that and break that flow of traffic, then to make sure that you're cleaning yourself off, you're dipping in the boot baths, you're spraying yourself down with chlorine dioxide, you're changing your gloves. Other things that we do are when our calves leave a pen, we're all in, all out. So a group stays together their whole time on the feeder. When they leave the pen, all the bedding is removed, the pen is sprayed down, and then we come in and we foam down with just an airless foamer, and we use a product called Enforce in here. And so we scrub really well. We'll spray it down again, we'll foam it down again and scrub it again a little so we can penetrate that biofilm layer in there. Spray it down again, let it dry, and then we come in again with our chlorine dioxide. Chlorine dioxide is definitely our friend after having dealt with some crypto in the past. We really believe in that, and we use it to help with sanitization and cutting down. Something else that we emphasize is how you can bring things with you from the cows to the calves. So we'll use, if you're working with a newborn calf, we really like the milkers will feed the calves at night. So they'll sport those sleeves on their arms, and we have some over in our newborn area that they can put on when they tube feed those calves colostrum, just to cut down on that pathogen transfer from a cow to a calf. I've been working a lot with the cows lately, and I have a separate set of the bibs that I wear when I'm working with the cows than I do when I'm working with the calves. So I make sure that I'm not bringing the goodies that all the cows carry over to the calves. The other thing is we have a protocol binder. So all of our protocols for cleaning are written down, just those easy reminders of the working from the smallest calf to the younger calf. All that stuff is written down for our employees to refer back to.
Great information, Stacy. And obviously biosecurity has always been very important to your farm along with other farms throughout the country and the world. How has COVID affected how you guys operate and your biosecurity practices? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So fortunately, because biosecurity was always something that we had in our minds, there wasn't a huge change. I think the biggest things that we did is we made sure that we printed out those CDC recommendations in English and in Spanish. So all of our employees would have access to them, and tried to provide them with the most current and factual information that we could. The only place where our employees are really working close together is in the milking parlor, and many of our employees are family members. So the 6 feet rule doesn't necessarily apply in the same way because they live together as well. But, you know, we talked with employees about the importance of, if you're not feeling well, don't push it. You know, you need to stay home. This isn't the time to, you know, buck up and come to work anyway. That this is really important that you take care of yourself, and that, you know, we take care of each other during this time. And other than that, I mean, just reiterating those same things. I mean, you know, if you work with calves, you generally try not to touch your face anyway, because again, calves can give people things that make them sick too. So a lot of those things were common practice anyway. So mostly it was just reiterating them.
Perfect. Well, it does look like we have a few questions coming in, so we'll jump into those. The first one is, can biosecurity plans be simple, or do they have to be complex? Dr. Angie, maybe you want to take that one?
Sure, it's kind of up to the farm what they want to do. Kind of just like vaccines, they can be tailored to your farm. So yeah, they don't have to be that complex, but if you wanted them to be, you could. But just working with your vet will really help design one specific to your farm, your needs, and what the risks are on your farm.
Perfect. And another question, what type of disinfectants do you recommend? I know you mentioned the tech bulletin that we have. Is there any in particular that you specifically would recommend?
Yeah, so that tech bulletin is a really good resource. Just looking at kind of what diseases you guys on farm are really dealing with the most. Even common bleach can do a good job. Tectrol that does a really good job on bacteria and viruses. I really like chlorine dioxide, like Stacy. Especially for crypto calves, does a really good job for that.
And a question for Stacy came in. How do you deal with employees that cut corners or refuse to follow protocols?
Sure. So fortunately, especially in the calf world, our team has worked together for quite a while, and they're very invested in the health of the calves and the health of each other. So we don't tend to have a huge problem with that. I mean, I think that is probably, if you can make people care, it's a lot easier. But otherwise, we talk about stuff a lot, and we have signs up all over reminding. You have to be willing to kind of sometimes have those awkward, conversations of, hey, I noticed that you were doing this and you really need to be doing it this way, and this is why.
Perfect. Well, it looks like those were the only 3 questions that came in. So to close, Stacy, why don't you go ahead and maybe share some closing remarks or a couple tips maybe for a farm that is looking to start implementing a biosecurity plan?
Sure. I would say that overall, the biggest thing is that you just need to take the time to do it. I mean, we're all strapped for time, and on the farm, there's a million things that you can be doing at any moment. And sometimes those protocols and that biosecurity layer takes the back seat, especially if you're dealing with maybe sick animals, things like that. But I promise you that it's worth the effort and that time of getting your team together and getting those protocols in place. And I would say that's the first place that you need to start. You need to work with your team to really establish clear, easily carried out protocols, because you have to have those in place before you can communicate expectations to your staff. I mean, it's really not realistic to expect people to just know what to do when it comes to biosecurity, because it is so farm specific. Like Dr. Angie said, that, even your disinfectants are going to be really specific to the challenges that you have on your farm. So I would say make the time and the space to get those biosecurity protocols in place, and then really spend time working with your employees on them and explaining to them the importance of them.
Really good advice, and some things that can be taken back right away and applied on farm. Dr. Angie, before you get into your closing points, one other question did come in for you. Somebody asked, how do you disinfect going from farm to farm as a vet? I believe you mentioned vets are one of the more high-risk groups, so what things do you do to help protect yourself and protect the farm?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually if I'm doing like a necropsy or I'm in a stall with or a pen of animals and I'm wearing like overalls or coveralls, I will put on a new pair, and then before when we're done, I take it off, so then I have clean clothes underneath. I also have like clean and dirty parts of my car, so only dirty things go in the dirty area and clean things are in the clean area. I try never to go back in my car with dirty boots on. I always try to spray off my boots to get all the organic material off first, and then I use a brush and a disinfectant, and I scrub off my boots very well before leaving, and then I actually put my own shoes on and my boots in the clean area before I get back in. So I'm not part of the spread.
And do you want to share some closing remarks with us?
Sure. Just keeping in mind that your biological risk management is very important. All diseases are transmitted by just a few common transmission routes. Your disease risk can be managed efficiently and effectively. Just being aware and making that awareness education is really essential. The USDA has a really great website for education on different diseases like foreign animal diseases or domestic diseases. Really working with your veterinarian, Armor Animal Health vets would love to work with you on your biosecurity plan. Everyone's plan will be different, and you guys play a critical role as producers or owners of the farm. So, thank you.
Well, thank you both to Dr. Angie and to Stacy for being with us today and talking a little bit about biosecurity. And thank you to everyone who tuned in live today, or for those of you that are watching the recorded version. We are always looking for your feedback, so there'll be a short survey that'll be posted in the comment section. Please click on the link and provide us with some feedback. It's just a couple short questions. I also want to remind everyone that we currently have a contest going on our Facebook page. We're doing a no fair giveaway. So in honor of a lot of shows and fairs being canceled this summer, we are giving away a couple prize packs, a grand champion prize and a reserve champion prize that you are seeing on the screen now. To enter, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is go to our Facebook page and find the post. Then comment with a picture of you and your fair animal or your fair project, and tag a fellow 4-H or FFA friend, and you're entered. Everyone that enters will be getting an ice cream token mailed to them, and then we will be giving away that Grand Champion and Reserve Grand Champion prize pack. So feel free to go ahead and enter that contest, and it does run until July 15th. Next week, we will be having part 1 of a 2-part series. We'll have Dr. Armin joining us, along with Leslie. They will be discussing a mastitis herd evaluation. So be sure to tune in again live next week, Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Time. This is a weekly show, so for those of you that have been following us along, be sure to tune in again next week, Thursday at 3 p.m. to hear from Dr. Armin about mastitis herd evaluation. And with that, we want to wish you all a safe and happy 4th of July. Enjoy the hot dogs.